This is the 2022 Google Pixel 7, the standard non-Pro model that Pixel and Android purists alike will absolutely love. I'm going to start first with probably the most important factor for most people, and that's the price. It starts at $599 US and 999 Australian dollars for the 128 gig model. In fact, chances are, if you do a bit of digging, you could probably find it even cheaper on sale. And in a world of nearly $2,000 smartphones, an arguably flagship Pixel 7 is a bargain, and you should buy it. Now I could end the video right there, but that wouldn't be much fun and I'll probably get punished hard by the algorithm. So let's talk about why this phone is worth it. And I'm going to start first by talking about what people will notice first, and that's the design and the display. Externally, it looks almost identical to last year's Pixel 6, leaning really heavily into this whole visor design, with the main difference being the camera bar being integrated into the frame. So like the biggest 7 Pro, this whole unit is one unified part and it looks way cleaner this year. The frame and the camera is made of a brushed aluminium, which feels really nice, looks very clean, and is not at all a fingerprint magnet. Though I can't say the same for the rear glass, which is still a fingerprint magnet and slippery AF. And unlike the 7 Pro though, the 7 is a much more forgiving size for most people, and I think purely from the smaller size, it's far less likely to be dropped and broken. But I can't speak for your own clumsiness. So here I've been using the black version, which I think is a really stealthy option, which looks great. It's a real clean design with just the G logo in the middle, and even then it's really subtle. And as you can see, unlike the 7 Pro, there's only 2 cameras instead of 3, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. On the front, you've got a really nice 6.4-inch 90Hz AMOLED display. It's fast, vibrant, and color accurate. It's not an LTPO display, but that doesn't matter because it's still fast enough, and the resolution is 1080p, which is more than sharp enough, and so the phone will be much better for it with regards to battery life. Honestly, I never felt like I was missing out using the Pixel 7 from a display perspective versus the biggest 7 Pro. In fact, the flat edges mean that I wasn't contesting with accidental touches like I was with the curved screen on the 7 Pro. So that's one huge advantage here for the normal 7. Now the only thing I'm a little disappointed with the 7 though is, and this is really nitpicky, but it's that the bezels aren't symmetrical around the display. They were able to achieve this with the Pixel 5, and nothing can achieve it with a mid-range phone 1, so why can't they do it here? It's a really small detail, but it would have gone a long way to help make it feel even more premium. But speaking of premium, the great haptics we had last year with the Pixel 6 are back again, and I'm happy to report that the vibration motor in the Pixel 7 is really solid. You get nice, solid, well-defined taps that you'd normally only see in the most expensive phones, and that's great to see. Now, like last year, the fingerprint sensor is embedded underneath the display, and fortunately, it's not a buggy mess like it was last year. It works smoothly, quickly, and most importantly, accurately. No complaints here. And then if you really didn't like the fingerprint sensor, like the 7 Pro, we've got Face Unlock back this year. It only uses the selfie camera for facial recognition data, so it is a little less secure than your traditional Face IDs, but in practice, it works really well, and you've basically got an instant unlock here. Then flanking the display is a stereo speaker setup, which does get plenty loud and does the job for casual content consuming and gaming. Speaking of which, the Pixel 7 handles gaming pretty well thanks to its G2 tensor chip. Now that chip isn't terribly different to the one we saw last year in the Pixel 6, but that's not a bad thing because you can still play most games no problem. It does get a little warm to the touch when playing for longer periods of time, but then honestly a serious gamer probably won't be using a phone like this anyway. And for casual gamers, it's absolutely fine. No burnt hands here. Then on top of the G2 chip, you've got 8 gigs of RAM, which is plenty for a bloatware-free Pixel experience, and it handles everything thrown at it really well. It multitasks really well, browsing the UI is like butter, and it can even handle really resource-intensive tasks like photo editing in Lightroom, video rendering, and even all of Pixel's computational photography now with no issues. And speaking of using the phone itself, whilst the size actually isn't that much smaller than the biggest sibling in the 7 Pro, I found the 7 much more comfortable to use from day to day. For me, it still isn't super comfortable to use one-handed since I don't have the biggest hands, but the slightly smaller screen and slightly lighter weight makes a huge difference in my opinion. Pure weight numbers don't tell the whole story, and whilst it's only 197 grams versus 212 grams in the 7 Pro, so no more than 15 grams difference in weight, I found the 7 far more comfortable to use. This combined with the fast screen, zippy chip and smaller size, and you've got a phone that has one of the best user experiences in any Android phone of 2022. No fatigue here. Whether you're just waiting for your morning coffee order or lying down sideways in bed, it'll stay comfy to use. And despite being a more pared down experience, it also doesn't compromise on all the features you'd expect, like wireless charging, IP68 water resistance, and a pretty big 4,355 mAh battery. All features we see in typically more expensive phones, which is really great. And then speaking of battery life, the Pixel 7 I've found has regularly hit about 5 hours of screen on time. And this is with pretty liberal use of various really power intensive tasks. And this is despite having significantly less juice compared to the Pro model where it has 5,000 milliamps. And I think a lot of this is thanks to the smaller, slower, and lower resolution screen. It does chew through battery pretty quick when you really push it with things like gaming and photo editing, and it can get a little warm, but it's never been a distraction in my use and never restricted me from day to day. That being said, wireless charging being here also means you've got a convenient feature that the A series or other mid-range phones miss out on. I've got wireless charging pads all over the place, and I can just plonk it on one of these and give it small bits of charge throughout the day really conveniently. Now the Pixel 7 also has Android 13, and I'm not going to go through the whole feature set again like I did with the 7 Pro. Link will be in a card up here or in the description. But all you need to know is that the 7 Pro has it. The 7 will have the same features too. All the same computational muscle you get like Unblur and Magic Eraser works well. And if that doesn't interest you, well, that's fine as well, because Android 13 is really just an iterative update from Android 12. And there's really nothing too different in the grand scheme of things. Honestly, the best compliment I can give it is that it just gets out of the way and you don't notice it, meaning it just works. But what's also an iterative update too are the cameras. Compared to last year's Pixel 6, there's really not a great deal difference. The rear hardware is pretty similar with a 50 megapixel shooter and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide. Surprisingly though, the front has received a slight upgrade to a 10.8 megapixel shooter that we saw in the 6 Pro compared to the 8 megapixel module we saw in the last Pixel 6. So let's start with that. Now I'm not the biggest selfie shooter, but I can confirm that the lens provides a wide enough angle to be versatile enough so that it can be used across a whole majority of different settings, whether it be a large group selfie or individual selfies to capture the landscape behind you. Combined with Google's computational nous, the photos it produces are really detailed, they're vibrant, saturated, and possibly a little over sharpened. And I think that's to compensate for the fact there's no autofocusing with this selfie lens. So it goes without saying that you're gonna have to sharpen a few little details. Now comparatively, the main camera system is still a reliable one. As mentioned before, the system here is pretty much the same as last year's Pixel 6, but it's still worth a mention given how good it is and where most of the improvements come in processing thanks to the faster G2 chip. So here we've got a dual lens system, which is plenty for most people. It covers the two most commonly used and probably the most useful focal lengths. You've got the main standard wide, which is a 50 megapixel shooter, and you've got the ultra wide lens, which is a 12 megapixel lens. The photos here are very typical Google, full of detail, full of dynamic range, a tad over sharpened again, but still very pleasing to look at across the board. And the shooting experience is enhanced by the new G2 chip, with next to no shutter lag when shooting, and processing time is really snappy. Even in low light, we've got that naturally large aperture of f1.85, which means it still handles these slightly tricky situations quite well, and you get a nice decent bit of natural bokeh or background blur as well. And then even if the scene drops really dark, the Pixel 7's night mode is still a step up from the Pixel 6. The photos themselves are still pretty similar in quality, but the step up is really in how quick it shoots. Kind of like the 7 Pro, it now is one of the faster night mode shooters out there. Less time holding it still means less chance of having a soft, blurry photo, and that's a massive win in my book. But unlike the 7 Pro, the ultra wide is still old news. Like the Pixel 6, it's still a 0.7 times ultra wide instead of the super wide 0.5 in the 7 Pro. And more importantly, it's not autofocusing, which is a real shame. So since it's a fixed focus lens, you're basically banking on the fact that it's an ultra wide angle with a naturally larger depth of field to have things in focus, and then you rely on Google's computational smarts to sharpen all the appropriate details. And now, to be fair to the Pixel 7, most ultra wide photos are perfectly fine in detail and accuracy, but if you ask any photographer, it's always easier to just capture the photo naturally in focus than to add artificial sharpening after the fact. The Pixel 7 Pro has benefited massively thanks to its new autofocusing ultra-wide, and in my opinion, that's a big tangible difference between the two. So that is something to think about when you decide between the 7 or the 7 Pro. But as mentioned before, most of the time, photos that come out of this ultra-wide is still pretty good. There is a little bit of softness in the edges if you look really closely, but for the majority of people, and when you're going to be sharing it on Instagram or on TikTok, it's going to be fine. All you Pixel peepers out there are probably going to opt for the Pro version anyway, so this won't really apply to you. Then you've also got the fancy new features that we've seen in the 7 Pro, and again, that's thanks to the G2 with things like cinematic video. Honestly though, I'd probably give this one a pass on this generation, as the background blur you get with cinematic mode really does quite obviously look fake. Otherwise, when it comes to normal video, it's been pretty great for the last couple of Pixels, and it's no different here. Video maxes out at 4K 60 frames per second, and in the majority of situations, the main lens captures very nice footage in most environments with great picture quality, detail, and dynamic range. Stabilization also works really well here, and it does a great job at minimizing those edge jitters that we often see with some of the best phones like the Galaxy S22 series. Unfortunately though, the ultra-wide lens really should be limited to being used in really good lighting, as it really does become a bit soft when the light gets a little low. But when it's daytime, it does give some really nice and dramatic looking footage. Great for those Insta stories when you really want to show off the scale of something. And that pretty much does it for the Pixel 7. It's excellent value, and I'd argue it's one of the best valued smartphones this year. It doesn't break the bank, it has guaranteed security updates, it still maintains flagship quality performance in all aspects, from the build quality to the reliability of its camera system. I can't fault it for what it is. It's got an excellent user experience with performance and ergonomics, and frankly, it's the best Pixel for most people, and will remain as one of the default recommendations for anyone looking for a new Android phone this year, especially for those who don't need the absolute best of the best features. But what do you guys think of the Pixel 7? Do you agree that it's great value and it should be one of the first ones that you consider? Let me know why or why not in the comments section below. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. As always, give us a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and ding the bell icons so you don't miss out. Stay safe out there, have a happy holidays, and I'll catch you in the next video. Cheers.